Welcome to another episode of Preferred Walk-On, PFF's college football show. I am Max Chadwick alongside my co-host Dalton Wasserman. Dalton, we kind of recorded the way too early top 25 last week before the national championship game. We thought to ourselves, okay, you know what? We'll watch the national championship game. We'll enjoy that. We'll put out the way too early top 25. Then we'll take the week off, man. We'll recalibrate, go into the next week, go into the offseason with a fresh mind. Well, Nick Saban had other plans, man. And maybe the biggest story in college football in years and maybe ever has just dropped. The greatest coach of all time, Nick Saban, Alabama's head coach, is retiring. So Nick Saban now retiring now, like I said, the greatest coach of all time, most national championships in college football history with 7 of them. He's one of only 3 coaches to win a national championship at 2 different schools, joining Urban Meyer, who did it at Ohio State and Florida. And then Pop Warner did it at Pittsburgh and Stanford all the way back in the early 1900s. Nick obviously did it with Alabama and LSU, 11 SEC titles, also won a MAC championship too. Can't forget about that when he was at Toledo. 292 wins, 15th all-time, and he's a 2-time coach of the year as well. So when you stack up his resume, Dalton, I mean, this is the greatest coach in college football history. It feels weird that we're going to go into next season without Nick Saban, man.
It almost feels wrong, doesn't it? But yeah, no, it's immediately the biggest story. I think it goes from now, obviously, it's kind of been the year of Michigan, even now with the suspense of Jim Harbaugh and JJ McCarthy and everything else that may happen, or are they good enough to repeat? Are they going to have all the pieces, the head coach to repeat? And now this just threw everything off. And as far as our rankings go, that's just shot now. We'll have to just do the whole thing at some point. But no, this is the biggest story in college football, not only for the legacy, and it's really a big historical moment. And college football has been around a long time, and this is as big a day as it gets. Especially when it's so sudden. There was whispers about it, but I don't think you ever really think one of like those legendary type guys. Kind of the same thing we have going with Belichick in New England right now, where it's like, is this really going to happen? Like, it doesn't feel right after all this stuff. But no, it's the biggest story in college football now, as far as the legacy left behind, the state of the program, who might replace them, and just, you're right. It's gonna feel weird watching an Alabama game and not seeing Nick Saban walking the sidelines.
It is gonna feel wrong, man. And yeah, it's always, when you have a 72-year-old head coach, you're always thinking to yourself, okay, obviously, like, it's not gonna last for too much longer. But we heard rumblings of this, of that, hey, he was thinking about retiring. But I always thought, and we heard these rumblings before during the season, I always thought, okay, if he wins the national championship, maybe he'll hang it up. I did not think after that Michigan game, especially with the talent he's got coming back. We ranked Alabama number 2 in our way too early top 25. They were certainly a national championship contender heading into next year. I thought he'd come back and give it another go and try to go out on top with winning his 8th national title. I did not think it would happen after this one, but obviously kudos to him, man. I mean, like I said, he's the greatest coach ever. The impact, not even on the gridiron, that he had on college football and in Tuscaloosa is unbelievable, man. I mean, that guy is the most powerful man in Alabama, period. Not even the governor, not even anything else. It's Nick Saban. He is the most powerful man in Alabama, maybe the most powerful man in the South, honestly, man. But Nick Saban, the GOAT. It feels weird. And I know we're not an NFL show, man, but Pete Carroll is no longer the Seahawks head coach. He's also a Hall of Fame head coach. Bill Belichick, you just mentioned, most likely not going to be the Patriots head coach any longer. Maybe he'll stick around in the NFL and go for that Don Shula's wins record. It just feels weird that we're most likely not going to see Nick Saban, or we're definitely not going to see Nick Saban roaming the Alabama sidelines. We're not going to see Pete Carroll roaming the Seahawks sidelines, and we're not going to see Bill Belichick most likely roaming New England sidelines either. It feels very, very weird to be having all of these great coaches that we've grown up watching not be with those teams anymore, basically.
Yeah, and honestly, there's been even quieter rumors about Mike Tomlin lately too, and that's been 17 years with the Steelers. Also, I mean, it's you see even the coaching profession, it's getting younger and younger. It's everybody trying to find the next innovation, and I don't think that's going to be any different. Now, I think Alabama is going to look for somebody with substantial experience. It's not going to be some 33-year-old guy who's got a really good offense. It's going to be an established leader, somebody who's accomplished a lot. This is something, especially with as competitive now as the SEC is, with Texas and Oklahoma coming in, with Ole Miss building up, with Georgia. We still have Georgia ranked number 1 going into next year. Alabama's in a precarious position, because if they don't, for some reason, get this right, you can fall behind in the SEC really, really quickly.
You absolutely can. And I mean, Alabama fell behind before they got Nick Saban. So, I mean, yeah, it is definitely possible. But let's talk about how good of a job Alabama is right now. How good do you think this job is, and how enticing do you think this job is for basically every other coach in college football? Because you have to basically name almost every other coach. Because I still think Alabama is one of the elite jobs in the sport.
I think it's still, I think it's the elite job in the sport. Actually, I think it's the one job this offseason that could be considered even better than the Michigan job. The talent they can bring in, the
Mm-hmm.
amount of support they have. You have a 100,000 seat stadium that's full every week. You've got the legacy, the Alabama legacy. Now, there's a ton of pressure that comes with winning there, no question. You have to be able to handle that. The standard, first of all, losing 2 games in any given season is a failure, right?
Mm-hmm.
But which is why the pick at the top is going to be the biggest part of like, hey, can you just handle the pressure of being here, right? But it's as good a job as there is in college football. It's Alabama. It's the fact that in the last 15 years, Saban has turned it into that. Because you mentioned before he got there was a handful of years where it wasn't like that. And I
Mm-hmm.
think for the better part of college football history, it has been. And that standard is still what's going to keep talent coming in there. It's just got to be continued properly going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at the two greatest coaches maybe in college football history, Nick Saban and Bear Bryant. Nick Saban has 7 national championships. Bear Bryant has 6. They both were Alabama head coaches for most of that time. So, yeah, it is definitely one of. I think it's at least a top 3 job in the sport. You can argue it up even higher than that, I think. But in terms of resources, the prestige you just mentioned he's got as well, the finances, the fertile recruiting grounds, man. I mean, Alabama under Nick Saban, I think the biggest reason why they've been so successful, they dominate recruiting. Dominate. They always get all the best players, and they obviously coach them up very well as well. But they dominate recruiting, and you can do that in the South. Like, you could really just kind of stay in the South and get players just from the South, and you still are going to be one of the top teams in the country because of how good the South is at high school football. So that's another thing that you got going for you too. So you got the money, you got the resources, you got the prestige, and you got the recruiting grounds to really, really excel. And I mean, over the last decade and plus, probably Alabama's put more players into the NFL than any other school in the country. Now, of course, it has a lot to do with Nick Saban and how great his staff has done, but it just shows as well just how, not easy, but you can get top talent to come in there. And if you get top talent to come in there, man, that's kind of half the battle in college football. So Alabama's certainly good. The only thing I want to say, though, about this job, that it maybe would make any other coach in the country kind of pause a second before, signing the dotted line. You're replacing Nick Saban. You're the first guy to replace Nick Saban. That is the hardest job probably in college football history, is to replace the greatest college football coach of all time. So if you're not immediately competing for national titles and winning national titles, that pressure is going to be on you quick. And there's a great quote I saw from someone a couple of years ago when talking about the best jobs in college football. And they say the best job in college football is to replace the guy who replaced Nick Saban. The worst job in college football is to replace Nick Saban. So I don't know. Certainly, if I'm a coach and I'm looking at this right now, I would love all the potential that comes with the job. And obviously, like we just mentioned, all the resources you have there. But I'm also a little hesitant to say, oh man, I'm the guy who's replacing the greatest of all time. Like, imagine being the shooting guard for the Chicago Bulls after Michael Jordan is gone. Like, that's something that kind of scares me a little bit. But it'll be interesting to see what kind of names are attracted to this job now.
I think there's 2 things that come to mind for me when it comes to the next guy. One is just going to be substantial high level experience, and 2, I think connections even to Saban and to Alabama as like loosely trying to continue that legacy is
Mm-hmm.
really, I don't want to say it's going to be a requirement, but it's going to be close. And now we'll hear guys like Dan Lanning and Kalen DeBoer come up with this, but I think about guys who have Alabama connections. I think for years I've actually thought Lane Kiffin was biding his time until he could get that job. That's possible. I don't think Steve Sarkisian would be off the table. I think a guy who might have timed out really well for him, considering his team just kind of had a below their standard year. Keep in mind, Dabo Swinney played at Alabama. I think that's another one. If it fits both, right? He's an Alabama guy, he played there, and he's won multiple national championships also. So I think Dabo would be a pretty smooth transition. We saw this past season where it's kind of, at Clemson, I don't know if it's getting stale yet, but there's been kind of hints at it. The one thing with Dabo is the big complaint is he's not really used the transfer portal as much as he should. Now, would he come to Bama and suddenly do that? I don't know, but I think about guys like that. Jimbo Fisher is a former Saban guy, although the way it ended at A&M, that's probably a little lower on the list. But they could go two ways about it, or they could go and see, they wanted Ryan Grubb as their OC last year. Maybe they go and find a way to get DeBoer and Grubb from Washington and bring them over to Bama.
Yep.
It's going to be somebody with some sort of, I think, connection to it. They're not going to go in just some completely different direction. I mean, I think, haven't we heard whispers before that even Kirby Smart would think about it? I don't know that he would jump ship.
I don't think he
I don't know
would.
that he would jump ship the way it is and the way he has it at Georgia now, but I think there was talk about that in the past. It's going to be somebody with connections. Like it wouldn't be to me somebody like, let's say, like Brian Kelly, or
No.
or Jim Harbaugh wouldn't leave Michigan and go to Alabama, right? Like that's not. I think a previous connection to the program to kind of keep things sort of similar to how they were might be. I don't want to say a requirement, but I think it would help a lot. Something about Dabo Swinney, just that, like, I know it's kind of electric, but I feel like it would be the right time for him to do something like that, don't you?
But I think it's the right time for him. I don't know if it's the right time for Alabama. I'd be scared of Dabo. Because how against, I know Clemson's made strides in NIL before, but like that's so important now. I don't know if I want to hire a guy who has been so vocal against NIL and has not used the transfer portal. That I'm scared. If I'm Alabama, I think I can attract other coaches that I'd want more than Dabo Swinney. I think he's definitely a guy to keep an eye on for sure. Because like 5 years ago, after he was winning national titles with Trevor Lawrence, we would have said, "Hey, when Nick retires, it's going to be Dabo." Like that was the guy. I just don't know if he's the guy anymore with how it's gone recently. The two you brought up, so Kirby and Sarkisian are interesting. Kirby, I don't think is even remotely a possibility because Kirby, one, you can make an argument Georgia might be the best job in the country. I know Brad Crawford, who does a great job for 24/7, ranked the top jobs in the country in August. He put Georgia number one. And also Kirby went to Georgia too, so it's an alum there. I think he's there for foreseeable future. I think he's kind of going to retire there, honestly. But the other one is Sarkisian. Now, he was Alabama's offensive coordinator, Nick Saban, so he's got that connection. But the thing that I am kind of iffy on is I think you can make an argument that Texas is just as good of a job as Alabama, if not even slightly better. I mean, Texas, in terms of the pockets they have there in Austin, is ridiculous, probably the deepest in the country. And, Steve Sarkisian just got some pressure off his shoulders by leading Texas to a Big 12 title and college football playoff berth. We just mentioned it, the pressure you get, man, when you're replacing Nick Saban. I don't know. It's almost like now I want to say it is kind of a lateral move for Steve Sarkisian to go from Texas to Alabama. I just don't know if it's worth it to do it when you just got the pressure off your shoulders and now you want to go replace Nick Saban. I don't know if Sark. I've heard that name by a lot of reporters. I just don't know if that's a job. If I'm Sarkisian, I don't think I'd be interested personally in the Alabama job. I think I'd stick where I am at Texas.
Yeah, it's hard. This is going to be a fun search, and I don't know that it's going to be a quick search either. And again, I've thought for a long time that Lane Kiffin was angling for a job, but we've been talking lately about just how much talent he's bringing into Ole Miss. I go, why not take that same talent and just take over, right, at Ole Miss? I mean, that's a weird one. It's those arguments that make me wonder then, because I mean, Texas program is in a really good state right now. Ole Miss's program is on the rise. Georgia's spectacular. Like it makes me think. And Dabo, like you said, that's the problem. Is Dabo going to like adjust it and get into modern times? It does make. That's the part that makes me wonder if they go kind of sideways a little bit and go get a Kalen DeBoer, right? And just go, you know what? They had their run with boatloads of NFL talent. They wanted Ryan Grubb in that offense last year. Could they just pivot and just go ahead? And I know DeBoer's got no Alabama ties, but clearly, I mean, the guy, what is he now? 104 and 12 as a head coach. I mean, it's hard to argue with that. And to bring that level, just that modern offense into Alabama and have a coach who's always had success. I mean, maybe they do go that route. It's hard. I think this is not going to be something that's solved within the next 3 or 4 days or within the next week. This is going to be, they absolutely have to get this right. Especially with as loaded now as the SEC is, with Texas and Oklahoma coming in. I think you're going to see nothing short of 10, 12, maybe even 15 names that come up for this. And all of them probably make sense to some degree, but which one to them makes the most sense is going to be a hard pick.
The one thing I love about college football, the people on Reddit and on Twitter too, who track the flights, like the private jet planes from going from Tuscaloosa Airport to wherever. I'm excited to see if there's like a Eugene to Tuscaloosa, like stuff like that, because those reporting are always so funny. I think the favorite, and I've seen some betting odds already come up for this, which is crazy, but I think the favorite for this job right now is Dan Lanning. And I think this is the guy that when we talked about Nick Saban potentially retiring, I think we did it off air. I brought him up as I think he's the next guy. I think he's the one that's kind of biding his time. Obviously, he was Kirby Smart's defensive coordinator. Kirby obviously was Nick's defensive coordinator. Dan has obviously done a tremendous job at Oregon already in his 2 years there. I think he's the guy. Obviously, he's got connections to the South with being Georgia's former defensive coordinator. He's the guy that I'm circling right now as I think he's the favorite for this job. And I think that would appease most Crimson Tide fans is if they hire Dan Lanning. And I think right now I would say he's the favorite. I haven't heard Lane Kiffin enough. I think Lane Kiffin will be a great hire as well. But
I think there was a time. I think there was a time when Kiffin was really like even especially like when he was at Florida Atlantic, right? Like I think he took that job kind of wait now. Let me see how long before it is that Saban retires. And then the Ole Miss job. The flights thing is fun too with him when he took that job because it was all like when he's interviewing with Arkansas and then he's going back to Oxford and doing all that. That was like the most fun one ever. But the only thing with him now is he's built this thing so well at Ole Miss that he's probably less tempted to do that now.
Yeah.
There was no question. There was to me like a 3 or 4 year window when he was waiting for this moment and it just never came.
I wonder if I think he still might. I know the team he's got, man, but I mean, he might be thinking, listen, I built this team. We're all in on 2024. Thing about Alabama is you're all in every year. Like this is the kind of team they bring back every single year. It's not like this is a one-shot deal. Like it feels like for Ole Miss right now. So I wonder if he's almost thinking, hey, like, this is the job I'm waiting for. If he gets offered, if I'm Lane Kiffin, I'm taking the Alabama job. Honestly, if I get offered that job, I'm taking it. Some other names that Pete Thamel from ESPN brought out there that I wanted to throw out there. So DeBoer, I think would be tremendous. I think DeBoer would be a great hire. I would love that as well. Mike Norvell was another one that Pete Thamel posted. I wouldn't hate that either. He brought up James Franklin. That would be insane. I don't think that would be a hire that Alabama fans would be very happy about. I don't think that would happen. Marcus Freeman, Notre Dame's head coach, that to me still feels a little soon for something like that. And then a couple of names I wanted to bring up too. Mike Vrabel. What about Mike Vrabel, man? He's got connections with Bill Belichick. Maybe if they go that route, I don't think that is to me as a way out there one, but I mean that'd be a pretty crazy one too if they brought him in.
That's out there. That one's out there. I think I have a hard time believing it's going to be any NFL head coach. Yeah. I just don't. That's such a big transition and to reach up and take a guy who's been in the NFL and bring him now into just everything that's going on in college football now. I mean, you mentioned before, even the money. The money talk used to be about, well, just how much are you paying the guy? Well, now it's so much about money with like, how much are you paying me? How much are you paying my assistants? How much are you paying the players? Let's be real. That's what it is. How much are you paying the players? How many guys are we getting in the portal? What are recruiting? There's so many different directions. Like a guy who's never had a program like that, and Mike Vrabel, that would be a massive. I think any NFL coach would be a massive risk, even to bring back. Let's just say it's not going to happen. They're going to want somebody younger, but let's just say like they were thinking about a Pete Carroll. Like college football is it's not even the same sport almost as it was the last time Pete Carroll when he was at USC. So I would highly, highly doubt that they would bring somebody in from the NFL directly into what's essentially the top spot in college football. I don't see that happening.
Oh, they did it for Nick Saban. Nick Saban, Dolphins to Alabama. Maybe they do it.
Yeah, but like, right.
I don't think it's happening. I've heard the name Mike Vrabel. I just wanted to throw out there. I don't think that's happening. He has the Belichick connection. I know Belichick and Nick Saban are great friends. But I don't see. I think Vrabel more likely is taking the Patriots job if Belichick is ultimately gone. But and then the last one I will bring up. This one is not happening. But I just wanted to bring it up just to get your reaction. Urban Meyer. What about that? You think Urban Meyer go? The other guy who won two, obviously Pop Warner, obviously is not available to coach Alabama right now.
I think Urban Meyer is happily retired.
Yeah,
I think so.
That
I
would be
think
hilarious.
him and I don't think just another random name that pops up, but I don't think he's coming back on the sidelines either. There's been rumors other places about Dan Mullen, but I don't think that's going to happen either.
He almost did his Cuse, man. Very close to signing a dotted line at Cuse. That would be great. I love Fran Brown. Honestly, Fran Brown's killing it right now, but that would have been cool too. All right, so who ultimately do you think is going to get this job for Alabama? Who do you ultimately think are going to sign to replace Nick Saban?
You make a good case on Lanning. Hmm. I'm gonna say I'm gonna say DeBoer.
I love it.
Maybe they go off the wall a bit and just go, you know what, we don't necessarily need a Bama connection. I think the more you talk with Lanning, and I think DeBoer is blazing hot right now with what he's just done the last 2 years. I'll say they get DeBoer and Grubb in the whole package, and they try to build that thing offensively.
Dude, I know DeBoer loves Washington, but he would be jumping at that because of how much. I mean, we put him 15, I think, in our ranking going into next year. Like,
Yeah.
there's a chance Washington falls off a little bit, not only a little bit, a good bit next year. Maybe they go 8-4 or something like that. So if I'm DeBoer, I'm thinking, okay, I just lost basically all the top talent from my team. It's not like we recruit at a high level either. If I'm him, I'm thinking, okay, let's try to parlay this into the Alabama job. I think that would, for him, I think he would absolutely jump at that. Lanning is gonna be interesting. Lanning, I know his contract's kind of coming up too. Maybe Phil Knight, obviously Oregon's got that Nike money. Maybe Phil Knight ponies up and backs up the Brinks truck and keeps him there. But I'm going with Dan Lanning right now. But I think DeBoer, Lane Kiffin, I think those are other two guys that I would really love for that job right now. All right, so real quick before we leave too, what if they get a hire that maybe is just not that great, honestly? Do you think there's a chance? I mean, Alabama's roster, top to bottom, like we mentioned in our ranking show, one of the best in college football. Like, can we see this roster get poached and all of a sudden transfer portal gets absolutely wild with some of these guys?
Yeah, this is different than other situations we've seen, right? Where a coach leaves and like everybody follows him. I think about like what happens at James Madison, or there was another one where a coach had a lot of players following him. I can't think of it right now. Like Michigan State has some guys, right? From Oregon State. This is different because it's not Nick Saban going somewhere or taking another job. We've seen plenty of guys follow. This is now a bunch of guys who they're in limbo, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I even think about like a Jalen Milroe, right? Like, what if there's a
Caleb
coach comes
Downs,
in?
yeah.
What if a coach comes in and they kind of feel the way Bill O'Brien does, and they're not really about Jalen Milroe, right? Like all of a sudden on two fronts. One, then Alabama would have to find themselves a quarterback, and two, Jalen Milroe is a free agent. So I mean, and he could go anywhere and turn. I mean, he could turn anywhere around. Honestly,
Yeah.
Like, you talk about I can't even think of like USC. Let's say Jalen Milroe went to USC.
God,
I don't know, something like that, right? I think this for all the players, the way things work now, and for the coaching staff. No, I mean, it's gonna be it's the biggest story because I think like at Michigan, even if Harbaugh leaves, right?
Yeah, you got Sharon Moore.
It feels like you could either just make Sharon Moore the head coach or kind of get somebody and like it feels more stable, doesn't it? Like a lot of those big name guys, especially on defense, are going to stay. I think at Alabama, when you go to Alabama, honestly, there's tradition is all that stuff. But for the last 15 years, why do you go? Because Nick Saban wants you.
Right.
Right. I mean, he takes helicopters out to high school fields and he does all this stuff for you. And he's the greatest coach ever. Right. This is still just a top 5 talented Bama team. But if they start feeling like maybe this isn't where we want to be, or if a new coach comes in and says, you're not my guys, even though they're Saban's guys and he knows what he's doing. There's a lot. There's like it's Alabama, so obviously they'll still be good, but to like we're sitting here thinking about there's a chance that they just might not be on the throne anymore, and it's weird. It's obviously it's weird, and I think about too just how quickly that could happen because the SEC is just more loaded than ever. Like this could if they go in next year and they're just immediately an 8-4 type of football team.
God,
it's going to be
it fall apart at the seams basically.
Yeah, it's bad, and it can happen fast. It can, especially if a bunch of talent were to walk out the door, it could happen really fast. Real quick, am I wrong in thinking? Just as I'm going with the conspiracy you mentioned about you don't think Sarkisian is likely. Am I wrong in thinking wasn't Arch Manning's commitment at the end of it down to Texas and Bama?
Oh, man.
Just a conspiracy level,
I
like
know
just
Georgia. I think Bama was in it. I know Georgia was in it.
I thought Texas and Bama and maybe Ole Miss because
Because of, yeah.
we're like the last three.
Yeah, I do
Didn't he
remember
pretty much
Georgia. Georgia came down to the end though for him. I can't remember who else
could you
was.
imagine could you imagine if I ever turned around just Sark and Manning take over for Saban? Just
Dude, Ewers. I mean, Ewers too could just be like, hey, I'm going to Alabama. Like that would
well
be unreal too.
If Sark leaves, we could see Ewers go to the NFL.
Yeah, you could. He could. Yeah. Again, I don't. I think Sark. If I'm Sark, I would not be interested just because the job I think is just as good, and two, like you're not the pressure's on you. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting, man. You got Jalen Moreau, who's we're gonna do our quarterback rankings in a couple months, maybe or so. He's gonna be probably 2 or 3, maybe in our quarterback rankings behind Carson Beck.
Top five,
Top
somewhere,
five,
yeah.
easy. So I mean, you could see him, Caleb Downs. You could see. I mean, and also like they lose a lot of talent for sure, but like Alabama has always got 5-star top 10 recruits waiting in the wings that you could see enter the transfer portal. All of a sudden, those guys are huge names too. So, yeah, that could be huge. And I don't know if you saw a tweet Marlon Humphrey tweeted out after the Nick Saban news. He goes, man, if Nick Saban retired when I was there, I would immediately enter the transfer portal. So I wonder if there's a lot of Alabama players right now. They're kind of thinking, I don't care who we get, man. I came here for Nick Saban. Now that he's not here. And again, it's not like he's going from Alabama to Texas. And then all of a sudden, if he went from like to a different school, then you'd see a mass exodus of Alabama players to whatever school he went to. He's just retiring. He's just done now. So it's going to be interesting to see what Alabama players do. I think they're, like I said, they're in limbo. And I believe the transfer portal for them only, opens up for 40 days because once your coach leaves, the transfer portal opens up for 40 days for you. So the next 40 days are going to be very interesting as to what a lot of top Alabama players do, man. So it's going to be super interesting.
I'm thinking I just had what's probably at the end of the day a really stupid thought. Is there any non-zero chance it's Deion Sanders?
Oh my God, stop. Can you?
I just thought of it because you were talking about portal and bringing guys and doing all this, and I was like, wait a minute.
Well, he's got the Nick Saban connection with the Aflac commercials. So
see that. See that?
Maybe behind the scenes in the commercial shoots, they're talking. Nick Saban's like, "Hey, I'm hanging it up. You want to take it?"
Is there even like a 1% chance that that's possible? They wouldn't dare hire a coach. I know he's Deion, he's prime and all. They wouldn't dare hire a coach who just won 4 games.
No, absolutely not. Okay, yeah, that one. I've heard that as a joke.
It had to be said once. I think
that might have been.
I won't go back to it. But
would that be the funniest hire they can make out of all of this? Honestly, maybe Urban Meyer.
It'd be the most entertaining one.
I think Urban Meyer or Deion Sanders would be just the most hilarious ones. Maybe, or how about Bill Belichick? What if Bill Belichick just goes, "Hey, what if I'm going to come back to? I'm going to go down in the college ranks."
Bill would never. He would never.
Imagine?
No.
That would be incredible. Nick Saban goes to defensive coordinator to be with Bill, just like he did in the NFL with him. That would be, oh my God, with the Browns. I think he did that, right?
Yeah.
That'd be incredible. But obviously, we're joking around now. But man, hats off to Nick Saban, man. He is truly the greatest coach in college football history. So kudos to him. Hope he enjoys his retirement. He's an absolute legend of the sport. He's a guy that we'll be talking about for generations to come. So Nick Saban, congrats to him. And now we just brought up a ton of names, man. The biggest job opening in college football in a long time, maybe ever, is open right now. And I cannot wait to see which coach dares to replace Nick Saban. Which coach has the audacity to be the guy to try to replace the greatest coach of all time? We are very excited about that. We'll obviously cover way more in detail once they actually make a hire, or maybe even cover more once we hear the names that they are interviewing. But it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with the Alabama Crimson Tide now that Nick Saban, the greatest coach of all time, is hanging it up for good. But for Dalton Wasserman, for producer Eli, I'm Max Shadwick, and we'll see you guys next time.